going to want to tell their home fans pretty much we're sorry through their play, right? We got to make up for it. We have to atone for it. Doesn't mean it's going to result in a win, but I don't think you're going to see effort lacking for the Boston Bruins in Game 6.
You're listening to the PuckUps Podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 33 of the PuckUps Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. On today's show, we're going to recap Game 5 between the Boston Bruins and the Buffalo Sabres and look ahead to Game 6. But first things first, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at Brian DeFelice_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps or leave a comment on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere the show has a social media account and post content. Now, heading into Game 5, the Bruins had a lot to play for. Yes, they're down 3-1 in the series, so of course they have to win Game 5 just to keep their season going. But organizationally, it just felt like in the wake of Game 4, the lifeless Game 4 that was Sunday afternoon at TD Garden, that was quite frankly embarrassing. It was shameful. I can't for the life of me understand how a team goes into a Game 4 situation down 2-1 in the series on home ice and doesn't even show up. It was the worst single game playoff performance by a Boston Bruins team in my lifetime, and quite possibly in their entire 100-plus year history. There have been far more devastating single games, right? Losing at home in Game 6 back in 2013 to Chicago and having to watch the Blackhawks skate around the Garden Ice with the Stanley Cup. 2019 Game 7 against St. Louis for the Stanley Cup. The Blues win that one and parade around TD Garden Ice with the Stanley Cup. So those are just two. There are multiple others where the Bruins lost on home ice in heartbreaking fashion in Game 7s and overtimes, yada, yada, yada. But in terms of start to finish from a competitive standpoint, I've never seen such an uncompetitive Boston Bruins playoff hockey game by the Black and Gold. And I don't want to take anything away from Buffalo because Buffalo did exactly what they should have done in that situation. They took advantage of Boston's mistakes and they capitalized and they skated away with a 6-1 win. But that wasn't even a situation of, oh my God, Buffalo is just so fast and skilled right now. The Bruins, there's no chance for them. They don't have a prayer. Trust me, the Sabres don't need anybody else's help. They can create turnovers themselves. They can take the game to the opposition. Buffalo's a great team. But even those Sabres players after that game, to a man, were probably looking around their locker room saying, boys, what the hell was that? Did the Bruins know we had a game today? Like, that was one of those games. And the first goal of the game is a perfect example of Buffalo just taking a gift and executing, being opportunistic, taking advantage, but they didn't really press the situation. Peyton Krebs is standing flat-footed in front of Jeremy Swayman just watching Charlie McAvoy with the puck behind the net, which is a very common play in hockey, right? Teams are going for line changes. You're just trying to keep your opposition at bay for a minute. You're telling them, hey, I'm looking at you, but I'm not really coming at you right now. And McAvoy had all the time in the world, and he just does what should have been a simple tape-to-tape pass to Jonathan Aspro on the left wing boards for a breakout. And I don't know if Aspro just didn't collect the puck or if Charlie's pass was a little bit off, but it goes off the boards. And then Fraser Minton has to collect the puck, and he's unsuspecting because he was expecting a breakout pass from probably Aspro. And, he turns the puck over with a poke from Tage Thompson, and the Bruins are scrambling. And next thing you know, it's 1-0 Buffalo. And the whole game just went downhill from there. But that first goal in Game 4 was just an example of the Bruins shooting themselves in the foot. Again, I'm not trying to take away from the Sabres, but I think even Sabres fans would watch that play and understand what I'm saying, where, your team they were doing the right thing positionally and they were opportunistic on the mistakes. But Peyton Krebs standing in front of Swayman while McAvoy has the puck behind the net, that's a play that happens 100 times a game by every team in the league. That's just, so the Bruins just couldn't get anything going. And after that, it was just lifeless, embarrassing. They were flat-footed, and Buffalo smelled blood in the water. And again, hats off to them for skating to a 6-1 win in Game 4, winning both games in Boston and earning a 3-1 series lead. But that game, from a Bruins perspective, was embarrassing. Embarrassing is being kind. It was shameful. It was inexcusable. And it's the type of game that was so bad, the whole hockey world was talking about it. Nobody let the Bruins off the hook in that one. And of course, they took accountability afterwards because, of course, you have to. But Bruins fans locally, hockey fans nationally, internationally, local media, hockey media in general, everybody was watching that game and saying, what on God's green earth were the Boston Bruins doing today? That was embarrassing. So the reason I say Game 5 was big for more than just one reason in Buffalo is because, yes, the first reason was to salvage their season and avoid elimination. Of course, Buffalo gets one more win, season's over for Boston. But organizationally for the Bruins, it just felt like that Game 4 performance was so poor. And of course, you lost Game 3 on home ice too, right? So you dropped 2 games on home ice. The Bruins' home record in the playoffs since 2013, which is, so we're dating back over a decade, is below 500. They've had big loss after big loss, devastating loss after devastating loss on home ice in the postseason. But listen, if you lose a game, that's not the end of the world. Did you work hard? Did you give it an honest effort? I think fans, yeah, you'll be upset if your team loses, but people respect an honest effort. And the Bruins did not give anybody an honest effort. Those fans paid hundreds and hundreds of dollars for playoff tickets, and they go out of their way to drive into the city or take public transportation to go cheer on their team, and the Bruins just no-showed. They left their legs at their apartments or their homes, and it's just inexcusable. And so nobody let the Bruins off the hook after Game 4, nor should they have. But the reason why Game 5 was so important was because if they went down with a whimper in Game 5 and they didn't even show up again, and you lose 3-0 or 4-1 to Buffalo and just go quietly into the night in round 1, after that Game 4 performance, then I think that locally there'd be a lot of people, fans, media, asking some hard questions. Sure, partly probably for headlines because, sports is entertainment at the end of the day. But what do the Bruins have in their leadership group in Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak, right? Like those guys that are supposed to be your leaders in that post-Bergeron, post-Chara era. They learn from those guys. Bergeron and Chara would never allow that Game 4 to happen in the first place. And they certainly wouldn't allow a back-to-back stinker in Game 5. So if that had been the case in Game 5 and the Bruins lost in the first round, which, by the way, in and of itself is not totally unexpected. Like, people didn't expect the Bruins to be in the postseason this year. So it's not that the Bruins losing in the first round is the sin. 8 teams are going to lose in the first round in the postseason every year. So it's not about the fact that you lose, it's about how you lose. And this Bruins team went into the playoffs kind of with house money in a win-win situation. As I said, nobody expected them to be in the postseason. So here they are. Best case scenario, maybe you win a round or 2 and go on a surprising run, right? And worst case scenario, so we thought, was, okay, maybe you lose in the first round in 6 or 7 games, and you get some young players, some experience for the future, and you build something for the future, right? That seemed like the 2 obvious scenarios. But the Bruins somehow, some way, through 4 games, found a loophole. They found a black hole in the postseason universe of possibilities. And they somehow, some way found themselves in a situation heading into Game 5 where, in a win-win scenario of win a round or 2 or get good playoff experience, they somehow found a weird alternate reality where it could be a damaging postseason for them. A team with no expectations, how does losing in the first round damage the organization going forward? Well, if you find out that you have leadership issues, that could be damaging. Now, again, I'm painting some worst case scenarios heading into game 5 that people were talking about, right? I'm trying to reset the stage heading into game 5 here. Fortunately for the Bruins and their leaders, David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman, Hampus Lindholm, Pavel Zacha, Elias Lindholm, Morgan Geekie, those guys, they all stepped up in game 5 in one way, shape, or form. And this Bruins team did go into Buffalo, and through 60 plus minutes, because this game did go to overtime, the Bruins were the better team. They did deserve the win in game 5. I think, obviously, Sabres fans and Bruins fans will always kind of look at a game through their own team's lenses, right? But I think it's fair to say the Bruins were the better team in game 5, just like Buffalo was the better team in game 1, just like Buffalo was the better team in game 3, just like Buffalo was the better team in game 4, and just like Boston was a better team in game 2. Every team that has won a game in this series throughout the course of regulation, and in the case of game 5 beyond, overall was the better team. I actually think, Buffalo had some good grade A's and some good territorial play in overtime in game 5. So outside of the Pastrnak goal, I do think Buffalo was the better team in overtime. But over 60 plus minutes, Boston was the better team in game 5. And they deserved the win. That wasn't a fluky win for them. They outshot Buffalo 29-26. They were 60% nearly in the faceoff circle compared to Buffalo. They out-hit Buffalo 43-27, which, again, a lot of times people counter, and it's true, by saying, well, if you have more hits, it's because you're chasing the game more. You don't have the puck as much. And that can be true. However, the Bruins also had 7 takeaways. Buffalo had 2. So the takeaways just goes to show that the Bruins were playing on their toes. They were anticipating plays properly. Now, it wasn't a perfect game by Boston, but it was a much better effort. And had they lost in game 5 in overtime, I still would have been sitting here saying, okay, you had a much more honorable effort in game 5, and Buffalo found a way to win. With that said, the Bruins did find a way to win. So, it's a funny game. It's a funny game. If Jeremy Swayman doesn't make a couple of big saves in overtime, or if Pastrnak doesn't find a way to score on that breakaway and somehow Buffalo gets the winner in overtime later on, are we still sitting here saying, potentially criticizing the Bruins leadership group for not getting the job done? No, I don't think so, because the effort is what mattered. They had to have the bounce back effort in game 5. And because if they didn't have a bounce back effort in game 5 after having a no-show in game 4, that's when you have to look in the mirror and say, hold on a second. What's going on with this group where their leaders cannot galvanize this group to have a bounce back game after truly the worst single playoff performance in Bruins history? I mean, the Bruins, that game 4, I don't even know what to say. Thank God I'm away this week, because I wasn't able to record that day. So that it's kind of why you're getting some of my delayed reactions to that game right now. I didn't have a chance to do a game 4 episode, but it was shameful. But the Bruins did have a great performance in game 5, and they deserved the win. And as I mentioned, it was David Pastrnak in overtime for the second straight game in overtime for the Boston Bruins. Their last 2 overtime winners in the postseason were scored by David Pastrnak on a pass from Hampus Lindholm. And Hampus Lindholm was much better in game 5 than he was in game 4. He was terrible in game 4. It was one of the softest games you'll see him play. And he's a soft player to begin with, so that's saying a lot. That giveaway in game 4 on the PK was just completely unacceptable. Such a soft play. But Hampus Lindholm did step up in game 5 in more ways than one. That final shift in overtime, it wasn't just the breakaway pass he sprung Pastrnak on. He was physical in the corner on Peyton Krebs. He was winning races to loose pucks. He was engaging physically. It was just so much better. And perhaps his D partner being Henry Jokiharju somehow unlocked that for him. I don't really think it should matter if your D partner is Jokiharju or Lohrei or Jordan Harris. Like, they're all kind of, similar caliber players. But for some reason, Jokiharju, maybe he was just more defensively stable, and he allowed Lindholm to kind of have a better game for himself too. But your leaders stepped up. I just talked about Lindholm. David Pastrnak had the game winner, but the rest of the game too, he was outstanding. He was dominating the puck. He was protecting the puck really well. He was a shooting threat all night. He was a passing threat all night. It was one of those games where you watch David Pastrnak and you say, oh yes, he is one of the best forwards in the world when he wants to be. And he was dominant. He took that game personally in game 5, and he stepped up. Thought Charlie McAvoy was very good. He didn't jump off the page as much, but he was solid, really solid. Morgan Geekie, a ton of shot attempts. I think Geekie had 11 shot attempts. David Pastrnak had 12 shot attempts. So message sent to the Bruins top players to shoot the damn puck. And I know that's the biggest hockey cliche in the world. I get it. But truly, when you try to find the perfect play, the perfect pass, it's way too easy for your opposition. Way too easy. They just get to stay in position. If you shoot the puck and it doesn't go into the back of the net, that's okay. You know why? Because maybe it goes off somebody's shin pad and goes into the corner, and now your oppositions have to turn around and go chase the puck, and now they're out of position. And when your opposition are out of position, it opens up passing lanes that weren't previously there, right? You shoot the puck on net, maybe it goes off the end boards, takes a weird carom. Maybe the goalie gives up a bad rebound, or maybe it does go in. But putting the puck on net is never a bad play, even if it gets blocked. Shot attempts are always encouraged. There's a time and a place to make a great pass. Don't get me wrong, okay? But playoff hockey is so tight that opponents aren't just going to go running around out of position unless you make them. And how can you make them? Quick puck movement, bodies to the net, pucks to the net, make life hard on them. Okay, sometimes teams, I feel like they get too robotic, and they keep looking for the perfect play, perfect pass, and that's great when it's there, if it's there. But how do you create those seams? You have to create those opportunities, and you have to make your opposition uncomfortable. And I felt like the Bruins did a good job in Game 5 of just getting pucks to the net. There's a phrase in life, quality over quantity, and I do think that that's applicable. And in hockey as well sometimes. But sometimes quantity in hockey can actually lead to quantity, because you get your opposition running around, you get them defending, you get them tired. When you're tired, mistakes happen, right? Guys get out of position. So it's a way to stay on your toes, right? The best way to defend is to attack. The best defense is a good offense, right? And that could be team-wide, just a mentality of let's just get pucks and bodies to the net. Right. And that's how you have to play a team like Buffalo, who they're a fast, skilled team, and they're physical too. The whole narrative heading into this series about the Bruins being bigger, tougher, stronger than Buffalo. I really just I don't see it that much. I think both teams are even when both teams are on their game. I think Buffalo has a little bit more of a finesse game than Boston. Obviously, the Bruins have to rely more on that meat and potatoes hockey, but that doesn't mean Buffalo can't do it or doesn't excel at it. I think both teams have size and physicality. But which team can dictate it more? That's the key. And I think in every game, the team that won got to their game more. So I mentioned Elias Lindholm. He had a better game. He, again, talk about just getting pucks to the net, getting shots towards the goal. You don't know what's going to happen. He gets a shot on net, weak shot. But for some reason, Alex Lyon can't really control the rebound as much. It kind of pops out into the slot. Nobody can get a stick on it. And Lindholm just does a turnaround shot. It's a nothing play. But if he doesn't get that original shot off, right, he tries to maybe get too cute or pass it through traffic, or he holds on to it and somebody strips him of the puck. That play never happens. Just get the puck to the net sometimes. And it's hockey 101. Right. And some people might look at me like I have 10 heads and say, oh, that's real creative, Brian. Well, listen, hockey's a fast game. You can do X's and O's all you want, and you have to do X's and O's. Of course, it's part of the game. But at the end of the day, it's a fast game played on ice with knives under your feet and a little black biscuit that's spent a little bit too much time in the oven, and you're whacking it with sticks. Shit happens. Okay. Like, just You got to sometimes just create some organized chaos. But yeah, I just thought this was a great night for the Bruins top players overall. And hopefully this can give them some confidence going forward. Jeremy Swayman was excellent. He was excellent, especially in overtime. He was really good, really strong. Overtime and the end of regulation, he had a couple of grade A saves. When the game was pretty much in one-shot territory, if we're being honest. And I just thought, yeah, listen, Boston, that was a prideful game. They if you didn't show up for that game, then like I said, there's a lot of questions towards that locker room, which would be interesting because they were they played above their skis all year, right? And they were a resilient team all year. The Bruins didn't lose a lot of. They had a couple of losing stretches earlier in the year where they had extended losing streaks, but the second half of the season, the Bruins didn't lose consecutive games very often, and they were a hard team to play against for I'd say 99% of their games this year. So maybe it was just I don't know, maybe they were running out of steam. Maybe you can only do it for so long. I don't really know, but they were able to flip the script in Game 5, and that's the big one to win. Heading into Game 5, I kind of thought the Bruins were going to play better, but I thought they were going to find a way to lose. Maybe it was I don't know. I just felt like Buffalo's going to somehow get that bounce on home ice, but it wasn't the case. That's a big one. That's a big one to get because now, if you're the Sabres, you had a chance to win on home ice in front of your home crowd and get some much needed R&R for round 2. And now you got to go back to Boston. You got to hop on the short flight, but you got to hop back to Boston. You got to stay there again. And this time around, you just kind of feel like the Bruins, they owe their fans a hell of a lot better. Well, I mean, that doesn't even describe how much better they owe their fans in Game 6. I can't imagine, Buffalo may very well win Game 6, but I can't imagine it's going to be as easy for them as Game 4 was. And like I said, I think the Sabres would be the first to admit after the game, they're probably looking at each other saying, what the fuck was that? Like, did the Bruins know we're in a playoff series? Like, they didn't want to play today? Players and teams know when they get their opponent on an off night. That Game 4 for the Bruins was it was an all-time off night. Off nights happen, but that was the worst playoff game I've ever seen the Bruins play. Truly, start to finish. Like, it was so uncompetitive. What were the shots? 20-2 after the first period, 4-0 score, or whatever the hell it was. I mean, that was embarrassing. But clearly the Bruins, looked themselves in the mirror after that game and really had to say to themselves, like, who are we? And are we going to go out as a clown show, as a circus act, as a laughing stock? Because, again, the Bruins entered this postseason with two pretty good scenarios. Surprise people and win a round or two, or, losing the first round, but you get some good experience with some young players. And I guess even if they lost Game 5, I guess you could still say that, Minton and Hustendinov and even Hagens to an extent and Lohrei, that, they got some good experience, I guess. But, the stench of how they went out, I feel like, and people questioning their leadership and their top players would have overshadowed that. So fortunately, that wasn't the case for Boston because they did get the win in Game 5. And now you head back to Game 6 with some momentum, and they're really going to want to prove themselves. They're going to want to tell their home fans pretty much we're sorry through their play, right? We got to make up for it. We have to atone for it. Doesn't mean it's going to result in a win, but I don't think you're going to see effort lacking for the Boston Bruins in Game 6. And to be honest, that should never be the case in the postseason. You should never lack effort in the postseason. So, good, I guess. But I do think Boston's going to come out with their hair on fire. And if they're going to go down, they're going to go down swinging, and they're going to give Buffalo their all. Let's go to David Pastrnak after Game 5, who did have the game winner, and hear what he had to say about his game-winning goal on an assist from Hampus Lindholm.
David, you connected on an overtime goal with Hampus and 2 years ago. Is there a signal you give each other when something like that opens up?
Well, we are neighbors, so we always call it the neighbor connection. So now it's just great play, great ice. Seems like anytime he has the puck and I have opening, I have the confidence that he's gonna find me. So yeah, we have the chemistry, so it's fun and happy that we connected today.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the last time that David Pastrnak scored an overtime goal in the postseason, it was against Toronto in Game 7 back in 2024. And it was a beautiful bank pass off the end boards by Hampus Lindholm to give the Bruins the series win. And so that was a huge signature moment for David Pastrnak in his career. He had never had that moment before of a huge Game 7 game-winning goal. And Game 5, obviously, it was not a Game 7, but it was a season-saving goal. And you wonder if this can get David Pastrnak really going now. He did have 5 points in the first 3 games of the series, but he just didn't seem like he had the points and the production, but the eye test, he didn't seem like he was the best player in the series. He that kind of belonged to like Tage Thompson for a little bit. But in Game 5, David was dominant, and you could tell he had a hair across his ass and knew he had to be better. And so you just want to see that more consistently from him. He's capable of being that guy. He's that good. So we'll see if his confidence can carry over into Game 6. Same with Elias Lindholm. Same with Morgan Geekie. Again, I love the shot first mentality by all these guys. So we'll see what happens in Game 6. In Game 5. Before we move ahead here, it is worth noting the Bruins had some significant lineup changes and some lineup omissions that definitely was the subject of conversation before the game that we'll talk about as well. But the line of David Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm, and Morgan Geekie has not been good this year. To put it simply, they played together for 350 minutes. Okay, so 350 minutes of ice time together in the regular season. They had 2.74 goals for per game, and they had 3.26 goals against per 60. 2.74 goals for per 60, 3.26 goals against per 60. So, and as far as expected goals for and expected goals against per 60, it was a similar delta, but different numbers. So my point is, all year long when they were together, they were a net negative production line and a net negative generation line. Okay, so why would anybody think that line would be good against the Buffalo Sabres? Buffalo is a very mobile, very quick, very skilled team. Elias Lindholm is not a fast skater. He's not a good one-on-one player. Morgan Geekie is not a fast skater, not a great one-on-one player. They have their strengths, but it's not those two elements. And those are two categories that you have to play with against the Buffalo Sabres. You have to play quick against Buffalo. And when you have Geekie and Elias Lindholm playing with Pastrnak, specifically Elias Lindholm, because Geekie can play with Pastrnak. I have no doubts about that. But Elias Lindholm, he's just too slow moving for David. Like you can't have two line mates that are slow moving with Pastrnak. Maybe one. You can have one. You can have Geekie doing this thing, floating around out there and finding the soft ice, but you can't have two line mates that are kind of glacial with David Pastrnak. It doesn't work out too well. His game slows down. So they elected to go with Pavel Zacha, Marat Husadinov, and Pastrnak in Game 5. Now, Zacha became available because Victor Arvidsson is out with injury and is not looking good for Game 6 as well. Marco Sturm said he's still day-to-day, but it's going to be tough for him to go in Game 6. So the reason why Zacha hasn't been with Pastrnak all year is because he's been with Middlestat and Arvidsson, which has been the Bruins' most consistent line and one of the better 5-on-5 lines in hockey this year, statistically. So Marco didn't want to take that line apart, and he trusted that David would find a way to get going with Elias Lindholm or Fraser Minton. It was different guys throughout the year. But Zacha and Pastrnak have had a lot of chemistry throughout the years. So it's no real surprise that with Arvidsson out of the lineup that they decided to go with Zacha and Pastrnak now that second line, because of injury, got split up. And for the record, if Arvidsson does come back into the lineup, I still think that they should keep Zacha with Pastrnak, because I think Zacha is a better skater than Elias Lindholm. I think he's a better offensive player than Elias Lindholm. He can make plays quicker than Elias Lindholm. And I just think he has good chemistry with Pastrnak. So that line with Husadinov, who brings a lot of speed and tenacity and forechecking and some skill, was a highly effective line in Game 5. They also went with Casey Middlestat, Fraser Minton, and Morgan Geekie, and they looked okay together at times. And they had Alex Steves with Elias Lindholm, Mikey Eyssimont. Fourth line stayed the same. They did switch Minton and Elias Lindholm midway through the game to put Elias Lindholm with Morgan Geekie and Casey Middlestat, and it actually was a line that created Boston's first goal of the game to tie the game. So that was the lineup changes up front. And then on the back end, they kept McAvoy and Aspro together after a very rough Game 4. They put Hampus Lindholm with Henry Jokiharju. So that means that Mason Lohrei remained a healthy scratch. Jordan Harris came out of the lineup after an egregious giveaway in Game 4. So I thought Jokiharju was pretty good. And I thought Hampus Lindholm had his best game of the series, best game in a long time. So if Henry Jokiharju gets that out of Hampus Lindholm, then keep him in there, right? And Zadorov and Peak, kind of just did their thing. So those are the lineup changes for the Bruins. And let's get to Marco Sturm talking about the lineup changes and what the players' reactions were to them.
Particular reactions from any of the guys when they saw those lines? I mean, these are guys that never played with.
I was hiding. Probably never. I mean, probably I didn't tell them till right before the game. For sure there were some question marks, but the way they reacted, the way they started the game, I thought they liked it. But again, something new, and that was the whole point. We needed something fresh. I feel like we didn't want to go the same way again and again. We needed something fresh, and I thought that was the right time.
No, it was the right time. It absolutely was the right time. And as I mentioned, anybody who watched the Lindholm, Pastrnak, Geekie line throughout the course of the season when they were together for 350 minutes, using their eyes, could tell you that line was, they would get hemmed in their own zone constantly. Yes, of course, when you have Pastrnak out there and Geekie, you're going to find your goals, of course. But as I said, they had 2.74 goals for per 60 and 3.26 goals against per 60. So the numbers don't lie, and 350 minutes is a pretty significant chunk of time. So yes, the fact that they couldn't really get their stride going, they were okay in the first couple of games in Buffalo, right? But yeah, it just wasn't good enough. And you can't have your top line just completely getting negated and hemmed in and playing defense constantly, especially when it's David Pastrnak out there. You have to get him in the offensive zone. You just have to. So I agree with Sturm that they needed to shake up the lines. And listen, I think the lines were exactly what Marco hoped that they would be, right? He was hoping that Zacha and Husadinov could get David going and spend some more time in the offensive zone, and they did. He was hoping that Morgan Geekie and Middlestat could find some chemistry. They did. They had to switch the centers around there with Minton and Lindholm. But the big storyline heading into this game was the fact that Victor Arvidsson was hurt, and the Bruins were coming off of their worst playoff performance in their franchise's history, like by the numbers. So you kind of felt like Lucas Reichel, who drew in for James Higgins in Game 4 after he was scratched. Reichel didn't do much of anything in Game 4. And then Arvidsson got hurt. So the way you look at it is, okay, Reichel's going to come out and somebody's going to sub in for Arvidsson. So of the two roster spots up front for Game 5, you'd think that maybe James Higgins would take up one of them, just like he was in the lineup for Games 1, 2, and 3. And Marco Sturm decided to go with Alex Steves and Mikey Eyssimont. Now, Alex Steves is a 26-year-old AHL prolific scorer that really kind of got his NHL real first look with the Bruins this year. And he had a good first half of his year, earned himself an extension on a contract. But, Alex Steves he's a depth role player, and that's all he'll ever be. But fine, fair enough. Like, okay, so there's Steves, there's one. And then Mikey Eyssimont goes into the lineup. Now, Mikey Eyssimont, again, same thing, good depth role player, but he and Steves don't really have, I mean, Steves can finish opportunities better than Eyssimont can, but the Bruins have, including game 5, they have 3 goals in regulation in their last 3 games. So, no one's really lighting the world on fire offensively. And I think it caught a lot of people off guard that James Higgins, especially because he didn't really play himself out of the lineup, as Marco Sturm himself said. Yeah, Higgins had a couple of, rookie moments in game 3. And no, the production hasn't really been there for him. But his details were still good for the most part since playing with the Bruins. When pucks come to him, he got them out for the most part. He made good plays in transition. He checks well with his feet. He angles oppositions well enough. If he gets enough time in the power play, which he's barely had any power play time. He's on a second unit that got 10 seconds here, 15 seconds there. So Higgins didn't really get a ton of looks and opportunities where he would thrive. So listen, if you want to take him out of the lineup in game 4, I honestly didn't care about it truly. And, my eyebrows raised when Sturm scratched Higgins in game 4, but then said, we're looking for speed and skill. So that we're going to put in Reichel. Now Reichel has speed and skill, but so does Higgins. Like, to me, it's like, so, you're taking out a cheese pizza to put in a pepperoni pizza. Like, they're not much different. So I felt like if Higgins was going to come out in game 4, they should have done Eyssimont or Steves then. Anyway, long-winded way of me saying, I just think that, no, playoff hockey is not the time for development. Definitely not. That's not why I wanted James Higgins in the lineup in game 5. I felt like he had an opportunity to help the team more so than Steves or Eyssimont. But to Steves and Eysimont's credit, they did their jobs well, but they didn't really create much. Like, yeah, they were fine in the forecheck, but listen, they're fourth line guys, and it was their first playoff game for the Bruins. So not much is expected of them offensively. The least they can do is get their ass in the forecheck. Like, that's obvious. That's a pretty low bar to set. I mean, with Higgins, everybody's like, oh, he's not scoring. He's not ready. Not everybody, but, some of the old timers. Oh, he's not ready for playoff hockey. He's not scoring. Look at the box score. It's like, what do you mean look at the box score? Higgins' details are better than half the Bruins forwards in games 1 and 2. So, I mean, yeah, you want to show me the box score for 4 games where he didn't score, a goal or have an assist? Yeah, okay, yeah. You got me. You beat me in the quarter law there. If only there was more to hockey than just the box score, right? What is Eyssimont and Steves? What do they provide to the box score? I mean, Eyssimont had 4 points in his last 15, 16, 17 games this year, and Eyssimont had 2. And last time I checked, listen, I liked them in game 5. They were fine. I get why they're in there, but they didn't really create a ton of offensive opportunities either. So, I understand it. I understand that in a do or die situation, Marco Sturm is going to elect to go with, guys who he thinks may just be a little bit more mature at the NHL level and a little bit more seasoned. In fact, let's go to Marco Sturm and hear his reasoning for keeping James Higgins out of the game 5 lineup.
Did you contemplate throwing Higgins back in there and say, have at it, kid?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, he was in the mix too. But end of the day, I didn't. It's a game 7 for us, so I didn't want to put him in a bad spot too. He still needs to learn a lot. He played great so far to this point. Hopefully, I can use him again down the stretch. But yesterday, I thought, I need experience going into a game like that.
So my read right now, and this is kind of why, if you follow me on Twitter, you may have seen some of my reaction to the lineup before game 5. And listen, the fact that they won game 5, I don't want to be a Monday morning quarterback here and say, oh yeah, no, it's cool that they did Steves and Eyssimont. It worked out. I'm glad it worked out, but I can't go back on, my pregame thoughts. I have to stand by them, which is I still felt like Higgins being in the lineup gave the Bruins a better opportunity to win Game 5 than having both Steves and Eyssimont. You could have had one of them. You could have had Eyssimont and Higgins. Like, there was still 2 spots open for the lineup. So to me, Eyssimont and Steves just kind of felt a little bit redundant. You could have had one of them. And it's not like Higgins isn't defensively responsible. It's not like Higgins doesn't get it in the forecheck. He's not Mark Haslick on the forecheck, but Higgins finishes his checks. He checks with his feet. Like, he's not just floating out there looking for offense. So it's not like he doesn't bring, a 3-zone game. I recognize that his game's not as polished as it will be, and that the offensive generation hasn't really been there. I get it, but he's still a hell of a hockey player. And I like having, if you're giving me the option of having, Higgins or Steves or Eyssimont, like, simply put, Higgins is a better hockey player. So I like him in a do or die situation. But Marco Sturm felt differently, and I respect it because what he said was, I needed more experience in this game. So if that's how you feel, then nobody can argue that. Like, objectively, Higgins is the least experienced guy on the roster. So if experience is what you're going for in that situation, then, like, hey, you have to respect what Marco Sturm's philosophy is there. I can accept that. If you want more experience, I can accept that. What I can't really accept is when people, and I'm not trying to project on Marco Sturm, but when people sit there and say, they show screenshots of Higgins' box score through 3 games, and it's, he has no points. It's like, okay, yeah. How many Bruins had a point in game 4? How many Bruins had turnovers in game 4 when he wasn't playing? I mean, when he wasn't playing, it was the worst. It was literally the worst Bruins playoff game in the history of their team, start to finish. Now, I'm not saying Higgins would have made that much better because the whole team was just shit. But my point is, you took him out of the lineup in game 4 and the team was fucking terrible. So what was the excuse then? And then in game 5, yeah, like I'm glad they won in game 5. I don't think they lose that game if Higgins is playing in game 5. And but I guess ultimately the other thing I pick up from that is when Sturm says, hopefully I can use him again, down the stretch here, and it's like, okay, well, to me, I read that as round 2, game 1, if they advance. Like, if Sturm didn't trust Higgins' youth in a do or die game in game 5, why would he trust it in game 6? Why would he trust it in game 7? Right? I feel like Sturm's trying to patchwork his way through the first round with guys he feels, I guess, more comfortable with, given their maybe physical maturity and their experience. And if Mikey Eyssimont or Alex Steves can be the difference in a game with a single forecheck or a single whatever, like drawn penalty, or I don't know, and that gets them to win the game and win the series somehow, some way, then I'll tip my cap to Sturm and say, listen, you have a better feel than anybody else. So I'll give them that credit. And then if they do get past the first round, I could see Sturm, putting Higgins back in the lineup in game 1 of round 2 to try to prove himself and get his game going. And, if Higgins is playing well and skating well and scoring in round 2 and there comes an elimination game, well, I think Sturm has more confidence in him. But it's just been such a small sample size that, listen, I understand where Sturm's coming from. I just don't agree with it necessarily with both Eyssimont and Steves. And even in game 6, I'd still like to see Higgins in there for one of those guys, just one of them. But maybe that's me. Maybe I'm on an island. But either way, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy Bruins Sabres on Friday night, and I'll talk to you soon.